do the right thing. Take care of the protection of Caleb Williams and get to the quarterback, for God's sakes. Try that for the next season.
Good morning, Albert. How are you?
Good morning, guys. How you doing?
We are outstanding. We're expecting now that they're north of $80 million in cap space and ability to restructure deals and get more. And Kevin Warren sending an email out to season ticket holders. We are going to be very aggressive in free agency. We expect the Bears to be one of the stories of free agency. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that they have, now Caleb going into year 2 of his rookie contract. That's the window when you want to spend and put enough around your young quarterback, And so, I think the Trey Smith conversation that you guys have engaged in over the last couple of months is very valid. Obviously you're going to be shifting some things to fit the new schemes, both, what Ben Johnson's going to do offensively and what Dennis Allen's going to do defensively. And I think you will see to some degree a reshaping of the team around what the new coaching staff wants and taking advantage of having your quarterback on a rookie contract.
Albert, how do you feel about the tush push? This is a talking point lately.
Yeah.
How do you? We haven't ever talked to you about it. How do you feel about the play?
I don't I honestly, guys, I'm against banning it because if you go back a couple of years, I may have said the opposite, but I look at it and I've seen other teams try it. And it's not some cheat code that everybody can press a button and go to. It's a play that one specific team is really, really good at because they've got an outstanding offensive line and a big, powerful quarterback. And there are other things that I'm not wild about it. Yeah, sure, but the way I look at it is you shouldn't be banning a play because one team is excellent at it. To me, that's almost anti-competitive to do that, So, I understand people not liking the way it looks optically, and it is pushing the rules because there was a rule in place that that banned players from being pushed that way. If you go back, but it's within the rules and it's one team that's excellent at it. So I pretty strongly feel like they shouldn't ban it.
Shay, give your perspective on the defensive side in that regard. You just gave us in our last segment.
Well, yeah, I've heard Richard Sherman say it. I think Chris Canty was saying it this morning, and it's something I believe. If it's a penalty to leverage when you're on the defensive side of the football, why is it not a penalty to leverage on the offensive side? It just seems hypocritical.
That's a fair point. Yeah, no, that's a fair point, and I think it's probably to some degree I 100% understand defensive players feeling that way, where, in certain cases there are rules that are, put in place to limit what the defense can do, and there's not a matching rule on offense. So I 100% understand that part of it. I just, again, I think the timing of banning it wouldn't be great because it is, essentially going after one team.
Albert, in terms of wide receivers, we are hearing Keenan Allen's not going to be back because Ben Johnson wants more speed. Do you think the Bears are better off taking more speed in the draft with the 10th pick, Ashton Genty, or if there's a receiver there? Or are you more aligned with me? And I think, Hoodie, I know me, you give me Mason Graham or Will Campbell or whoever the best offensive or defensive lineman on the board, that's where I'm going.
Yeah, I think if you look at where Ben's coming from, you can see what they invested in at the beginning, right? And so they already had Taylor Decker and Frank Ragnow there when they got there, and they still drafted Penei Sewell in the first round. And then their second and third round picks, Levi and Aleem McNeil were defensive linemen. So they went O-line, D-line with their first 3 picks. They've continued to invest in those areas, and I think if you look at the strength of what the Lions have built, it's so much of their personality comes up front, And I think what Ben Johnson's looking at now is a lot less, in the trenches than he had in Detroit. So I think if all things are equal, You look at it and you say, yeah, like, they've got enough to win at receiver right now. Could they be a little faster? I certainly understand people saying that. DJ Moore, first grade as he is a little bit more of a gadget player. Rome Odunze's not a burner, so maybe in the second round, or you trade back into the bottom of the first round. Like if you're looking at like a Matthew Golden or an Emeka Ibuka, I could see that. But I would think the overall focus, both in free agency and the draft, is going to be in fortifying the trenches for the Bears.
Albert, what have you heard about the quarterbacks that will be coming into this draft? Have you heard in one way or the other of teams preferring Cam Ward over Shedeur Sanders? What have you been hearing?
Yeah, it's funny, Hoodie, is like my initial thought was that there isn't anybody with a franchise quarterback type of ceiling in this year's draft, or at least it felt that way. And I think if you're chasing ceiling, and like that's really, I think especially if you're an AFC team right now, like if you're trying to get to the mountaintop and Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and of course Patrick Mahomes are in your way, you sort of have to chase the ceiling with guys. That's where that's where the difference is with Cam. Cam's not like the most consistent guy, but he has flashes, and I could see where like coaches will look at it and say, yes, if we can put this all together, like he could become that. He has the physical capacity to become that. Whereas I think Shedeur is maybe a little bit more in like the same category as Jackson Dart. I think it becomes like a little bit more difficult to see them elevating and becoming that type of player. And again, I think with Cam Ward, this isn't like Caleb. This isn't like, this isn't like Drake May or Jaden Daniels. Like I think the path to getting there is a lot more narrow with Cam Ward than it was with the other guys. But he is probably the one guy you could envision like having a ceiling to get there.
I got two other things I got to ask you. One is, what do you think the Steelers do at quarterback? Because those saying, Justin Fields is going to be their starter, they benched him with a 4-2 record, and by his own words, he said, I didn't do enough to keep the job. Do you think they make a splash for Stafford, Aaron Rodgers? What do you think happens to Fields?
I think they'd still like to keep working with Justin. Cap is my answer to that. Like, now what does that look like? I don't think it's going to be handing him the starting job. But could I see a scenario where he's competing for the job? Yeah. Do I think that that's the first place they look? No. I think they're going to swing on Matthew Stafford. They've already talked, with his camp, and I could see them, making a play for Aaron Rodgers. So I think they're going to look at different options. But I think like they really liked working with Justin. They feel like there is some untapped potential there, and they do want to keep working with him.
The other one is Ashton Genty. I know he's a beast. I know he talked in an interview, the Super Bowl. He said, Chicago looks really good to me at 10. Do you think that he's going to be a guy picked in the top 10 of this draft?
So this is interesting. I did my annual column with Tom McShay and Daniel Jeremiah, who I think are, the two best draft guys out there now. And as close to scouts as you'll get in the media, like actual scouts, you'll get in the media. And I lean on those guys a little bit early in draft season as I'm talking to the teams as well. And DJ made an interesting comment because I've really heard for like I don't know, I've said to you guys, I'm sure, but over the last 2-3 months, like Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter are sort of the blue chip group in this year's class. And DJ was the first person to say to me, like, I'd throw Ashton Genty in there as a third. Now, he doesn't play a premium position the way those other two guys do, so he's not going to be valued quite the same way. But, if you're just talking about how good a guy is at his job and how well he plays his specific position, I think, there are going to be people who are going to look at it and say, I like Ashton Genty as a running back, maybe not quite as much, but on the same level that I like Abdul Carter as a pass rusher, or I like Travis Hunter as a receiver or corner. So a really good player, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with guys like him and Marion Hampton, who I think will be the second running back to go. And then the next group of guys, Caleb Johnson from Iowa and the two Ohio State guys. It'll be interesting to see after an offseason in which teams really benefited from investing in running backs in, Baltimore with Derrick Henry, Green Bay with Josh Jacobs, and of course, Saquon in Philly. I think it's sort of an interesting dynamic now where does this position get revalued a little bit? There aren't any big names in free agency, but there's a really good draft class. And it'll be interesting to see if a couple of those guys get pushed off the board based on what, we just saw Barkley and Jacobs and Henry do.
Albert, as always, we appreciate the time. Thanks for coming on the show.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
See you.
It's Albert Breer.
Yeah, he very tapped in. He makes valid points on how there was a reemergence of running backs this year, with Saquon leading the charge, with Derrick Henry right there. Mm-hmm. Again, if Ashton Genty is the pick at 10 and you told me that they got Trey Smith and Kevin Zeitler and Drew Dahlman all up front, okay. But if Mason Graham's on the board, how do you leave that D tackle there for a running back? That's my question.
Of course you do the latter. Of course you would. If this whole thing about running backs are they're a dime a dozen, just throw anybody back there, okay, then do the right thing. Take care of your lines. I'm not holding out a shingle for a running back at 10. I'm just not doing it. I'm not doing it. Do your due diligence in free agency, and this won't be an issue. If you don't, you got to get – I'd love for Will Campbell to be there at 10. I'd love for Graham to be there at 10. But you just got to take care of that business. We're not BSing around here anymore, Cap. Well, they could do this. No, you must do it. We're not. This is not how we've done in the past. Like, well, they could, and they could, and they could. No, you don't get the benefit of the doubt. Do the right thing. Take care of the protection of Caleb Williams and get to the quarterback, for God's sakes. Try that for next season.
Be a nice concept if you said, oh, wow, Will Campbell's still on the board? Let's go.
The Ryan Poles press conference from the Combine is at 9. Kap and J Hood, weekday morning, 7 to 10.